Welcome to Wales Today, live from Port Talbot. Well, it was much anticipated, but today the official announcement that Tata Steel is cutting 1,000 jobs across the UK, the majority of them here at this steelworks.
It's a very difficult day for our employees. However, I believe at this point in time we are taking the necessary action that must be taken to conserve 3,500 jobs.
How does a community that was built on steel deal with the loss of so many jobs in one place?
I have a son and a daughter-in-law that's working in there at the moment, so we don't know what's happening yet, so we can see. It's terrible.
Personally, I think it'll be Port Talbot will start to die again.
Well, tonight we'll be speaking live to the First Minister, but realistically, what can politicians do to influence what is a global industry? We'll also be getting the picture from India, the home of Tata's global headquarters, and finding out about the decisions being made there.
Also on the programme tonight, a deal is struck in a 15-year battle over the future of 2 reservoirs in Cardiff. And days after appointing Alan Curtis as interim manager, Swansea City bring in a new head coach, and he will have the final say on team selection.
Good evening and welcome to Port Talbot. It's famous steelworks lighting up the night sky. But tonight, this community is coming to terms with the news that 1,000 steel jobs will be lost across the UK, the majority of them here. 750 jobs will go at Port Talbot and at Llanwern in Newport. 15 jobs will go at Trostre in Llanelli. Added to that list, 200 support workers will also lose their jobs too. Why is this happening? Well, that's a question many here are asking, and it's something that the politicians have spent today arguing over too. We begin this evening with our business correspondent Brian Meakin, who spent much of today here.
After months of speculation, the announcement staff at Port Talbot had been anticipating came this morning. One of the unions unveiled a banner in support of jobs. Tata Security had it quickly taken down again. Tata Steel has invested heavily in this site, including this new blast furnace, and the company has been patient, but it's losing £1 million a day at this steelworks alone, and it hopes by reducing the number of workers here, it can start to turn that around. It's the UK's biggest steel plant, and it's showing the strains of the wider industry. Energy costs and business rates are higher here than in some parts of Europe. The problems have been made worse by cheap imports coming from China. Tata hopes by cutting some jobs, they can save others.
The measures we take, we're very confident on as a management and a workforce that we believe we actually can turn this industry around, not only for Tata but also for the UK and for the Welsh economy.
Are you sure that with the action you're taking today that this secures the future of this plant for decades to come?
No, I couldn't say that for a moment.
There had been talk of the UK or Welsh government taking a stake in Tata's sites here, an idea completely rejected by the company today. 4,000 workers and 3,000 contractors are employed at Port Talbot in well-paid jobs.
We're just a keeper of the keys here. It's not ours to give away. It's not ours to give away. We've got to try and ensure this for our children's children. The surrounding communities, the support to it, the shops, the builders who work for the people from here, absolutely knock-on effect is massive.
This site uses as much energy as a city the size of Swansea, and that means huge bills. The European Commission allowed the UK government to bring in financial support to ease the burden of high energy users like Tata. But Welsh ministers say Westminster has been too slow to act.
We were warning the UK government years ago about the impact on businesses like Tata about high energy costs. They didn't heed us. They've only heeded recently. And now, of course, something's going to be coming through now with the agreement of the Commission. But that, in my opinion, is too little too late.
Visiting a mosque in Yorkshire, the Prime Minister argued that his government had taken action.
The steel industry has asked us for action on energy prices, and we've taken that. They've asked us for action on procuring more British steel. We've taken action on that. They want us to take action within the European Union, and we've done that as well. But we'll continue to work with them. I want to have a strong British steel industry at the heart of our important manufacturing base.
Workers at Llanwern say the announcements led to huge uncertainty.
Just doom and gloom. So they don't know that people bring to meetings and they haven't really been told, if they're going or not or what.
The company will be hoping these job losses, painful though they are, will be enough to satisfy Tata's Indian headquarters that this is a survival plan to secure Port Talbot's future. In the coming weeks we'll discover whether it's convinced the board of that or whether even more will need to be done.
Well, let's talk to the First Minister, Carwyn Jones. Many people watching this programme tonight will ask what a politician like you in Wales or Westminster can realistically do to influence what is a global industry.
Well, we have been talking to Tata for some weeks now. Unfortunately, nothing can be done in terms of saving these jobs. We are focused on the people now who are going to be affected. There's a meeting on Wednesday with a view to taking forward plans to help them. But you asked about the industry itself. There's a glut of steel on the world market at the moment. It's a problem for the European steel industry. It needs a European solution. But there are two factors that are particular to the UK. The strength of the pound and the high cost of energy in the UK. Now, those are factors that are within the power of the UK government to influence.
What was in your power to influence was to do something about business rates, and not enough, arguably, was done in enough time.
Well, bear in mind, we've only had power over business rates since April last year.
Well, that's a long time ago.
And we have put in place a review to look at how business rates can help industry in Wales. But it's a very small part of the picture. We're talking here about the need to make sure that we attract hundreds of millions of pounds of investment into this plant. And we need to make sure that the UK government does its bit, that we do our bit, true, but also Europe does its bit as well.
One of the steelworkers said to me tonight, what we need to do is to put some sort of taxation, some sort of steel tariff on imports, like America does. That's what they wanted to be done. What about that?
It's true. It has to be done at the European level. Bear in mind that there's a sister plant in Holland, so you wouldn't put tariffs against the Dutch plant. But you're absolutely right to point out that there's a need to make sure there's action at the European level. It's going to happen next month. Should have happened sooner. But there are specific issues in Britain, such as energy costs, that need to be addressed now. UK government realised this last month. We've been lobbying them for 4 years, and they said they'd do something. They need to show that they're doing it.
When you talk to workers and management here, they speak as one voice. What many of those people leaving here tonight want to know is politicians and governments from all parties speak with one voice. Can you do that, and have you been doing that?
The answer to that is yes. The last thing people want to hear today is some kind of political tit for tat. I understand that. We'll work with the UK government. There are issues that they can deal with, issues that we can deal with, issues that need to be dealt with at European level. We'll do that. The politics shouldn't interfere.
You want us to stay in the EU. You'll be campaigning for us to stay in the EU in any forthcoming referendum. Has the EU been good for the steel industry in Wales, given this chapter?
What it has is it's provided a market for steel from Britain. But the factors that are not helping the plant at the moment have nothing to do with the EU. You're talking about the strength of the pound, you're talking about energy costs, those are, and the glut of steel on the world market. These are all things that have to be tackled, and tackled soon.
Carwyn Jones, thank you very much. First Minister Carwyn Jones. Well, many towns grew up around coal mines, and Port Talbot is pretty much the same when it comes to steel. This is a steel town, and the steelworks here casts a huge shadow pretty much a mile in every direction over the houses here. So how is this community going to deal with this announcement here, and what are its prospects for the future? Ben Price reports.
Vince Lewis and his family have a strong connection with Port Talbot Steelworks that goes back generations.
My father worked in the plant, my grandfather, my uncle worked there, my brother is a crane driver there, my brother-in-law, my son is in the stores.
Over the past few months, I've spent time with the family, and job losses have always been in the back of their minds, and it's had an effect on many of their colleagues.
There are people with families, mortgages, children, who obviously will have a much bigger impact on them. So that is that's a major worry. I mean, a lot of people depend on the works for their livelihood, and it's not only the direct people employed there, but there's many others outside of there who also need that place to pay the bills.
Today, after clocking off from his shift, I caught up with Vince again. He gave me his reaction to the job cuts.
It's really bad news, you know. It's a body blow, I'd say, to the local area, a body blow to the people on plant. I mean, you know, there's a lot of jobs. It's almost a fifth of the workforce, so it is devastating news.
Despite not knowing exactly who will lose their jobs in the coming months, like the Lewis family, there's uncertainty in households around this town. The Sandfields estate was built in the 1950s to house steelworkers and their families. People here told me this latest round of job cuts is devastating.
Well, I have a son and a daughter-in-law that's working in there at the moment, so we don't know what's happening yet, so we can see. It's terrible.
Bad, isn't it? Really bad. It'd be like a ghost town here if that shut.
There's a lot of people that still work down there, although there's only about 4,000 or 5,000 left down there. But personally, I think it'll be Port Talbot will start to die again.
And of course, today's announcement doesn't just concern those employed at Tata. It'll have a knock-on effect on many local businesses, some of which are on this industrial estate. From supplying vehicles and tools to filling empty stomachs at lunchtime, almost everyone has a connection. This hydraulics company believes such a significant number of cuts may well have an impact on them down the line.
It'll affect us indirectly. We supply the majority of contractors in there, all their hydraulic hoses and fittings, workwear, and we are starting to see effects already. So it's interesting to see what happens now in the next few months.
Many have described it as the lifeblood of this community. By far the biggest employer, it has supported generations of different families and a variety of local businesses. Looking ahead, it's hoped that those most affected will get the support they need at a very difficult time.
Well, as families here come to terms with this jobs announcement, ultimately the future of this plant and others lies not in Wales, but thousands of miles away in India, with those at the top of the Tata group. The BBC's India business reporter in Mumbai, Samia Hashmi, now on the changing fortunes of this global company.
Tata is India's biggest conglomerate, involved in everything from hotels to cars, tea to telecoms, and that's been going for more than 100 years. Over the past few decades, the Tata Group has been expanding internationally. It owns Jaguar Land Rover, and it was the purchase of Anglo-Dutch steel firm Chorus in 2007 that made it such a big player in the UK steel market. Tata Steel is one of the group's main businesses. It operates in 26 countries, employing 80,000 people worldwide. But in most of those places, it's struggling as global steel prices fall and it has to compete with cheap imports from China. Now, the decision about the UK business will be taken here in India. Whether or not to go ahead with plans to try and sell its UK operations will be decided here. And by cutting jobs and therefore costs, that makes it arguably an attractive prospect.
Well, let's talk to our economics correspondent, Sarah Dickens. How big an issue is cheap steel being produced in China and then dumped here? How big an issue is this in this story?
It's absolutely massive, Jamie, and it's got more so in the last couple of months. I mean, for a start, China produces half of the steel made in the whole world, and the amount of Chinese steel coming into the UK has doubled in the last year. And what makes that even worse is that steel coming in is coming in at a third of the price of European steel that is coming in. So you can imagine the battle that Tata is having day after day against that. In fact, there's recently been an investigation by the EU. They looked at the prices of Chinese steel coming into Europe and prices of the same Chinese steel going into Canada. The stuff that they were selling in Europe, they were selling at prices 28% lower. That suggests to observers that actually the Chinese producers, most of whom are state-owned, are targeting Europe.
This is obviously a very difficult day for those hundreds of families affected by this announcement. But perhaps if we can try and draw some light out of this story, this might be good news in the long term for this plant.
Yeah, terrible day for everybody working here and those particularly losing their work. And also, it is taking £500 million roughly out of the Welsh economy. But what I think we have to do is to hope that this is enough to save this plant. Because if the board record in Mumbai doesn't think it is. Remember, at the moment it's losing £1 million a day reportedly. If Mumbai doesn't think that this is enough, then worse news could come. So yes, it's a very painful decision to save it for the future, as happened in the 80s.
Sarah Dickens, thank you very much. Well, later in the programme, a proud and long history of steel making in Wales and how perhaps today's job cuts may play into the forthcoming Assembly elections and any European referendum. More on that later. First, the rest of today's news. Here's Nikki.
Thanks, Jamie. Some of the day's other news now, and BT is creating 100 jobs in Swansea. It's part of a move to take on 1,000 new staff across the UK by April next year. The move comes after the company pledged that it will respond to 80% of its customers' calls at UK offices this year. A man has pleaded not guilty to the murder of his former landlord. 59-year-old Alec Warburton went missing from his home in Sketty in Swansea in July last year, and his body was found near Conwy in September. 40-year-old David Craig Ellis was remanded in custody and is due again in court next month. An outbreak of a sickness bug has led to the rescheduling of some planned surgery at Wrexham Mylord Hospital. There are five confirmed cases of norovirus after several people were admitted with diarrhoea and vomiting over the weekend. One ward is affected and admissions to 3 others have been suspended to reduce the risk of the virus spreading. 2 reservoirs in Cardiff that have been the subject of a planning row for more than 15 years will once again be used to supply the city with water. A previous owner of Llynillen and Lisvane reservoirs had controversial plans to build hundreds of homes on the site, but faced fierce opposition. Campaigners are now celebrating after Welsh Water acquired the lease. Nick Pallett reports.
The tranquillity of this site belies the furious row that's been raging here for years. For decades, this was a local beauty spot for the people of Llynillen and Lisvane. But an entrenched planning row began when Western Power Distribution bought it and tried to build more than 300 houses.
We have powerful opponents who have invested...
Local people were incensed and campaigned against the plans. Today, that lengthy battle was finally over, following news that Welsh Water had acquired the site.
We've fought for 15 years to try and stop the development and to get this site reinstated. We've had 3 public inquiries, any number of High Court actions, so it's taken a lot of commitment from a lot of people.
I think it really shows the power of people, everybody working together and with a very determined end in view, so it's wonderful news.
3 years ago, Celsa UK bought the reservoirs, so they had a secure water supply for their local steelworks. But now Welsh Water's lease ensures the whole city benefits.
These reservoirs will help us to secure the water supply to Cardiff and the area for many years to come. Also, they're a fantastic site for local nature, for recreation and so on, and we're hoping to work with the local community to make the most out of these sites.
With more than 40,000 new homes planned for the city by 2026, this is likely to be a vital resource. But local people are just pleased that the water and the wildlife will remain here. Nick Pallett, BBC Wales Today, Cardiff.
On to football, and just days after announcing Alan Curtis as interim manager, Swansea City have tonight appointed a new head coach, and he will have the final say on team selection. The former Udinese manager, Francesco Guidolin, will work alongside Curtis until the end of the season. The Italian, who's 60, will just watch tonight's Premier League game against Watford. He previously managed clubs in Italy and France.
I think Swansea need players in this window to improve things, and I think it's all about players' attitude now, and I think Alan Curtis has transformed that in the players, and anybody that can come and help with a lot of experience I think is going to be a great thing for Swansea. But it's treacherous times, you know, and I think results have got to start to change pretty quickly.
Well, Newport County are also playing Blackburn in their rearranged third-round FA Cup tie. It's live on S4C, and we'll bring you the goals from both matches in our programme at 10:30 tonight. Well, time for a check on the weather. Derek's here, and some dry weather on the way.
Yes, some good news on the weather front, Nikki. Staying cold, but much drier and more settled midweek. Tomorrow, generally brighter than today. Some sunshine and frost. For this evening, cloudy, spots of light rain and drizzle, little snow on some of the hills and mountains. Overnight, most places becoming dry, 1 or 2 fog patches forming, staying above freezing under the cloud. Colder though in parts of mid-south and east Wales, with the frost temperatures falling close to freezing or a couple of degrees below. And there's also a risk of icy patches on untreated roads, a Met Office warning in force. So here's the picture then for 8 o'clock in the morning. A cold and frosty start for some of us, icy in places too. Some low clouds in the northeastern Powys, 1 or 2 mist and fog patches, otherwise dry and brighter than today, 3 degrees in Haverfordwest. So dry tomorrow then, no rain expected in Eglwys Swrw. Generally much brighter than today, most places enjoying some sunshine, although parts of the North Anglesey and the northeast may be a bit cloudier. Cold again tomorrow, temperatures 2 to 5 Celsius in the afternoon, up to 6 Celsius, maybe 7 on Anglesey. The wind mostly light. Now in Caerphilly tomorrow, dry and sunnier than today. The temperature struggling, only 2 Celsius in Blackwood with a light breeze. And then in Gwynedd tomorrow, it's looking dry and brighter than today. A high of 5 Celsius, 6 Celsius even in Dolgellau. Now tomorrow night, dry, some low cloud likely in mid and east Wales. Elsewhere, the sky clear. That means a widespread frost, a few freezing fog patches as well. Temperatures at Powys and the Marches could dip as low as -6 Celsius. Again, a risk of 1 or 2 icy roads. Then on Wednesday, we've still got high pressure in charge sitting over the UK. That's keeping these weather fronts behind me at bay over the Atlantic, at least for the time being. So most of the country fine on Wednesday with blue sky, but not sunny everywhere. Some places, parts of Powys, Wrexham and Monmouth, grey, misty and cold. Only 2 Celsius in Newtown and Prestine, 36 Fahrenheit. Then on Thursday, more dry weather, but it's probably cloudier. Maybe a little bit of sunshine in the north. A breeze picking up in the west, a southeasterly breeze, with temperatures a bit higher, up to 8 Celsius in Llanelli. Still quite cold, though, in the northeast, only 4 Celsius in Newtown and Welshpool. Then on Friday, that's when things are expected to change. Windier with a spell of rain, clearing to showers, and just look at those temperatures rising back into double figures with milder air from the Atlantic, 12 Celsius, 54 Fahrenheit. So the cold spell coming to an end later this week, but certainly staying very chilly over the next couple of days with some sunshine and frost. Nikki.
Thanks, Derek. And that's it from me. Time to return to Jamie, who's live at the Tata Steelworks in Port Talbot tonight. Jamie.
Nikki, thank you. Well, they've been making steel here at Port Talbot for over a century, all kinds of things, for the steel for your washing machine to the steel in your car. And over those many decades, the industry has had its ups and its downs. Our economics correspondent, Sarah Dickens, now on a distinguished history of a proud industry.
Hot, molten steel. It's fuelled the Welsh economy for more than half a century. A quality, valuable product made by many thousands of relatively well-paid workers. After the Second World War, Wales was scattered with steelworks with communities around them. They became centralised on a few sites, and in 1951 the large new steelworks opened at Port Talbot.
Where once the economic blizzards of former years swept across Port Talbot, there now emerges the Abbey Steelworks.
By the late 60s, Port Talbot was one of the big beasts. Around 20,000 people were making steel for anything from cars to much-desired new washing machines. In the early 80s, Port Talbot Steelworks had to fight for its future with harsher cuts than today. The Slimline project cut 12,500 workers to 7,500 in one blow.
It was a pretty bleak time for the town, and I think a lot of people worried then that, what was the future? Was it going to be sustainable? But then within a few years, you get investment, you got a big expansion in more of a coke ovens. And so, almost hand in hand with those scaling back of jobs was this sort of investment in the future. And so I think that's what's kept people positive.
The shake-up saved Port Talbot through that recession. Tommy Fellows started working there in the mid-50s, and 16 years ago he showed me around. Now retired, he looks at a map of all the steelworks and collieries that used to be in the area.
The people of Port Talbot are very tenacious. We've gone through this time and time again. In 1956, my father was put on short time in Marga Melting Shop. So it's nothing new to us because we've always survived, and that's the whole source of the exercise, survival. We're not going to go away like most of the big manufacturing industries in this country.
Port Talbot is producing more, better quality steel than in the past, but the pressure is on it again. In 2012, hundreds of workers lost their jobs at Port Talbot, but spirits lifted as Tata invested £185 million on a new blast furnace.
I just couldn't think of anything better to happen to this business than this. It's the best thing that could have happened. Symbolically, you know, steel making in Port Talbot goes back over 100 years, and, you know, an asset like this will put it on the map for another, hopefully, 100 years.
Port Talbot is still making 3.5 million tonnes of steel a year. The problem is finding customers at the right price. Throughout its life, this plant has competed on the global market, but it's a fight that's particularly fierce now.
Well, let's talk to our political editor, Nick Savini in Cardiff Bay. Nick, the Tata job losses announcement has inevitably, I guess, turned into a political row.
Yeah, occasionally, Jamie, we get job losses stories that have a real impact on the political debate, and 1,000 in the steel industry is clearly one of them, particularly in the light of the EU referendum and the Assembly election campaign coming up. On the EU, it is worth reflecting that under a fortnight ago, the Chancellor George Osborne was in Cardiff warning about a dangerous cocktail facing the British economy. Now, the key question will be, on a day like today, where a warning like that becomes a reality, does it make people more reluctant to want change and a withdrawal from the EU? Or does it make people more angry with Brussels and the EU and the claims that they haven't done enough to deal with the imports of cheap Chinese steel? And then more domestically, there's been a real blame game going on. Labour at Westminster accusing the Tories of cozying up to the Chinese. Here today, Cadwyn Jones saying if the UK government had done things differently, all of this could have been avoided. Now, the UK government has responded really saying it is all about economics rather than politics, and ultimately, you can't buck the market.
Nick Savini in Cardiff Bay, thank you. It's coming up to 7 o'clock tonight. Headlines from the BBC. This community is coming to terms with the announcement, long expected, that Tata is cutting 1,000 steel jobs across the UK, and the majority of them here. 750 jobs to be lost across Port Talbot and Llanwern in Newport, 15 at Trostre in Llanelli. Earlier, I spoke to the First Minister, Cadwyn Jones.
Unfortunately, nothing can be done in terms of saving these jobs. We are focused on the people now who are going to be affected. There's a meeting on Wednesday with a view to taking forward plans to help them. But you asked about the industry itself. There's a glut of steel on the world market at the moment. It's a problem for the European steel industry. It needs a European solution.
Well, this is obviously very sad news about the job losses in Port Talbot and elsewhere. We'll work very closely with the company and with the local communities to do everything we can to get people the training and the assistance they need. And we'll continue to do everything we can to help the steel industry.
I'll have an update for you here at 8 and again after the BBC News at 10. That's Wales Today, live from Port Talbot. Thank you for watching. From all of us on the programme, good evening.